You might have noticed in the last episode that I was having trouble figuring out how to mount the plate and the PCB into the bottom of the case. So here's what I was doing wrong. You can see here 4 pieces of hardware that came with the case. It's 2 screws, a washer, and this post-looking screw, which is called a standoff. The gold ring is where you mount the PCB down into the mount point of the case. And you can see the mount point of the case as the black circle inside of that gold ring. What I thought was supposed to happen was that the standoff would be used to screw the PCB into the case like this. And then the idea is to lay the plate on top of this standoff and then use one of the screws to affix the plate to the standoff so that the plate is basically hovering over the PCB. However, when I put the plate into the case, you can see here that there is no way to screw the plate down into the standoff here. Instead, there's just an empty area, and that's what was throwing me for a loop. The idea I had was, well, maybe the switches, once they were in the plate, would keep the plate affixed to the PCB so that it just sort of floated above there, freeform, but that didn't sit well with me. So I started looking at the PCB a lot closer and noticed a bunch of holes that I completely ignored. You can see here one of the holes that I'm talking about. Underneath this hole, there is no mount point. So then I figured this is probably how the PCB attaches to the plate. What actually needed to happen was that instead of using the standoff, you just use a normal screw, just like this. Putting the plate on top of that, you can see that really this area that's missing in the plate is simply so that you can access that screw without having to remove the plate. What you're seeing here is a diagram of how this hardware connects the plate to the PCB. And here you can see the hardware installed between the plate and the PCB, starting at the bottom of the plate where that washer sits, and into that washer through the plate, you can see the standoff in between the plate and the PCB. And then finally, on the top of the keyboard, you can see the gold screw screwing into the standoff, thereby affixing the plate to the PCB, providing a much better base than if the plate was just floating. Let's talk about stabilizers, or stab for short. You can see that I have the keyboard assembled down here, and I've installed one switch right at the bottom, and this is the switch that the spacebar will sit on. And just for fun, let's go ahead and take this spacebar and place it right on top of the switch where it's going to go. Just like that. And you can see, as I tap on this spacebar, that unless I tap it exactly in the middle, it starts tilting to one side or the other if I hit one side or the other. So how do we fix that? We fix that with what's called a stabilizer, and I'm going to go ahead and install this stabilizer in here and we'll see what it does. So we'll pull the spacebar out, and we'll pull the switch out too, because this wire here is going to go down below where the switch is. What we're going to do is take the wire of the stabilizer here and slip it into this horizontal hole for the spacebar and place it underneath the plate, just like this. And what you'll see is the 2 key switch mounting points on the side should just snap into the plate, just like that. And what you're looking for is that when you move one of these mount points up and down, the other mount point moves along with it, just like that. So let's go ahead and put the switch back in. And then go ahead and install the spacebar. And the spacebar, you can see here, is going to mount on 3 different points. Push it down. There you go, that's what we're looking for. Now, as you can see, as I tap down the spacebar, it moves up and down as a single unit instead of tilting side to side. This keyboard also has smaller stabilizers here for the left shift key, the enter key, and the delete key. Usually there's another stabilizer that you would install for the right shift, but because of the way this keyboard is set up, the right shift is actually just the size of a single key here, so it doesn't need a stabilizer on this particular keyboard. Before I put the rest of these stabilizers in, let's take a listen to it. Okay, not so bad, but again, just like the bottom of the keyboard here, we can sound treat the stabilizers so that they have a much more muted sound, because we're again looking for that thok sound instead of, I guess you would call this more of a clack sound. There are 2 different kinds of stabilizers, one that mounts on the PCB below it, one that mounts in a plate like we have here, And the third kind is a variation of the first kind. It mounts on the PCB, but it allows you to screw it in. A lot of people prefer the ones that screw into the PCB because it immobilizes the stabilizer so much that it doesn't cause any kind of rattle. But this particular keyboard has stabilizers that slap into the plate, so we'll go along with it. You can see here that I've disassembled the spacebar stabilizer, and I've placed it on top of the keyboard, which I flipped over. And the reason I flipped it over is because the bottom of this keyboard is a nice flat surface. Because what we're going to do here is just make sure that each of these wires is perfectly straight and are not warped in any way. And you can see this spacebar, if I tap on one side over here, you can see that it's not completely straight. And so we're going to go ahead and bend this wire until it's as straight as we want it to be. And we're going to do this for each one of these stabilizer wires. Okay, that's not that bad. I'll do a few more here. Okay, that's pretty good. There are three things that we can do to make sure that the stabilizers don't rattle and cause excess noise while we're typing on them. And those three things are clipping the stabilizers, lubing the stabilizers, and finally band-aiding the stabilizers. And that last one, band-aiding, is exactly what it sounds like. We're actually going to use band-aids to dampen the stabilizers. Now, any of these steps is completely optional. If you don't mind stabilizers that rattle, go ahead and feel free to skip them. But again, when we're building our own custom keyboard, we're looking for that nice thock sound. We're looking for a nice pleasant sound, and usually rattle is not a sound that you're looking for in one of these custom keyboard builds. And what I mean by clipping is, if you take a look at the stem that goes up into the stabilizer housing, at the very bottom, you can sometimes see this little piece that hangs down below. And what this piece does is limit the motion that the stabilizer can move down onto the PCB below. And, you know, it's kind of like a vestigial foot that doesn't have to be there. So a lot of times we go ahead and cut that off so that the stem doesn't ever make contact with the PCB down below it, thereby removing the noise that it makes. And the next step is called band-aiding. Below each of these stabilizer feet, we're going to put a little piece of band-aid so that if the stem happens to make contact with the PCB, the sound that it makes is a lot more muted. Most people will want to lube the stabilizers and clip the feet off of the stems. Whether or not you choose to band-aid really is dependent on how you prefer the sound of the keyboard to be. If you don't band-aid, you will leave some of that lively sound in the keyboard. And of course, if you put the band-aid in there, it will mute the sound of the stabilizers. Two of the stabilizers are going to lube so that we can compare the non-lubed, the lubed, and the lubed and band-aided versions for sound. All right, let's cut up some band-aids. So these band-aids are a little fat, and you just want them to be wide enough to fit vertically where the stabilizer housings will sit. So I'm gonna take just the side of this off to make it fit better. So, yep, about like this. You can see here I'm using a pair of hair cutting shears, because I find that it's a lot easier to cut band-aids with them for whatever reason. Yeah, that's about the right height. And then we'll cut off the curved parts of these because we're not going to use that. And before I cut the rest of this off, I'm actually going to take this backing, just a piece of it off, like this. And snip that off. Because I found that once you cut these off, into the little strips that we need. It's impossible to take the backing off. So then I'm going to take about 1/4 inch strips of each of these. And I'm only going to do 2 right now because I want to band-aid just one of these stabilizers to see if I like the sound that it makes on this board. So because I took some of that backing off, you can see it's going to be a lot easier for me to take the backing off. There you go, easy peasy. I'm going to carefully place these band-aids underneath. There you go. There you go. What I have here is an earwax picker. It's useful for, cleaning out your ears, but it's also useful for keyboard building. We'll use it to flatten down the band-aid here. And then we're going to take some dielectric grease. That's this stuff right over here. And put some on this earwax tool. A little blob. Don't want too much. And basically we're going to smear this on top of the band-aid. And you just want enough that the band-aid kind of changes color, but you don't want a lot of goop just on top of that band-aid. I'm going to do the other band-aid. You can see here that the band-aid is down below where the feet are going to go, and I've put the dielectric grease on top of it. I'm going to assemble some of these stabilizers. So here's the housing, and this is the stem that goes into the housing. So you can see here that one side of the stem has a single hole, and the other side of the stem has 2 holes. And if you take a look at the case, you can see that one side of it has this little foot that sticks out in front of it. That's the back of the case. And what we want to do is we want to place the stem into the foot where the 2 holes are facing the back, or where this other foot is right here. Just like that. And then we can take the wire, stick it in the bottom hole, and it'll snap. Let's see here, make sure it's in the bottom hole. Yep. And it'll snap right into this weird foot in the bottom. So, that. Oops. There you go. So, you can see if I twist the wire here, the stem will come up and down. And that's an assembled stabilizer. So to place this into the board, what we're going to do is slip the wire underneath the the plate, and it should snap right into place, just like that. And what we're looking for, again, is if you move one of these keycap mounts up and down, they'll both move up and down in unison. So I'm going to build 2 more, but these 2 other ones I'm actually going to lube. And we're going to use 2 kinds of lube. This right over here is a Teflon lube, and basically we're going to use this one anywhere plastic touches plastic. I'm just going to place some on the inside of the housing. One, comes number 2. I'm being a little generous with these, but not so much that it totally gunks it up there. The second kind of lube we're going to use is dielectric grease here, and we're going to use this on the wire itself. And this stuff you're going to use actually quite a bit of. And what we want to do is take a good amount of this and just place it or not place it, but just dip it in there. And it should be kind of gunky actually, just like that. But you want to go past the elbow here of the wire. Just a bit. Just like that. And just kind of like move it around in there to make sure that that bottom hole of the stem is nicely lubed. Snap it in. And we'll take the other one, put the housing in, or the stem into the housing. And again, get a nice bit of dielectric grease and snap it into place. So what I'm going to do is take this non-lubed one and place it up here where the delete key goes. I'm going to take a lubed one and place it where the return key goes, or the enter key. And then we'll do a lubed one and left shift key. I'm going to see if I can't use the same key to test each and every one of these, because the keys where these stabilizers are all have a little bit of a different size, and so that would make the test a little bit unfair if we use the different sizes, because you know they'll have different sounds they make. So I think I'm just going to use well, I think a shift key will fit on all of these. No, the smaller shift key here. Yeah, okay. I'll use the smaller shift key. That should fit on all of them. And so let's put a switch in to each of these. The delete key is the non-loop key, I believe. Yeah, okay. So put the shift key there. And listen to that. It's really rattly. It's not a very happy sound. Let's take that off. The switch that has been lubed but has not been band-aided. Oh, that's a much deader sound you can hear there. There's still a little bit of a high frequency sound, but it's not as bad. I don't know if I'd call that a rattle. All right. We'll do the side where it's lubed and band-aided. It's just slightly better, I think. This side again. Yeah, definitely, I like it on this board at least band-aided. So I'm going to go ahead and band-aid the rest of these stabilizers and also give the rest of them a good lube. So I bought these stabilizers before I knew anything about them, so they probably aren't the most quality stabilizers out there on the market. Even with a lot of lube, you can still hear a little bit of rattle, and I could probably make the rattle go away by using quality stabs. So what I might try doing is buying a set of really good stabs off the internet and reinstalling these just to see if it improves the sound of the board, but this isn't terrible, so we'll go with it. Next time we're going to talk about switches, and switches is a big subject. It's a major part of how to make a keyboard sound the way you want it to sound and feel the way that you want it to feel. So remember, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and hit that like button if you learned something today. And until then, stay safe, and I'll catch you later.